Pope Francis is upholding Catholic teaching on contraception. Join us with this positive dispatch, Church Militant's Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomes. Jules, tell us some good news about Pope Francis.
Right. It's a moment of joy for Catholics to hear the pontiff categorically and unequivocally teach Catholic moral theology. And a week ago, he spoke at a pro-life conference where he again very emphatically condemned the use of anti-life methods that are used to contracept rather than conceive life.
Well, this may come as a surprise to, lukewarm and faithful Catholics alike. Tell us, what exactly did Pope Francis have to say?
Pope Francis talked about how sexuality in this postmodern world is impoverished, reduced to sensations that soon become self-referential, and its dimensions of humanity and responsibility are lost when contraception is used. And he even went on to say that the tragedy of violence between sexual partners, including the murder of women, here finds one of its main causes. Very strong words indeed from the pontiff.
Well, excellent. And Francis related the use of contraception also to this sordid issue of manufacturing babies that's going on today?
Well, absolutely. He talked about how, let me quote, he said, today, the ideological and practical separation of the sexual relationship from its generative potential has resulted in the quest for alternative forms of having a child, no longer through marital relations, but through the use of artificial processes. And he said it's wrong to create test tube embryos and then suppress them, to trade in gametes, and to resort to the practice of surrogate parenthood. Now, this is particularly refreshing, Brad, because as we have reported quite a few times, Francis kind of gave the thumbs up to a homosexual couple in Rome who have had 3 children through a lesbian woman. Through artificial insemination. And therefore, this affirmation against surrogacy is welcome news indeed.
And that is excellent. Did he also root his statements in Scripture itself?
He talked about how the pro-life values that Christian couples can exhibit through rejection of contraception is something deep-rooted in the gospel itself. And that, again, was refreshing because he spoke emphatically of Humanae Vitae, Pope Paul VI encyclical against artificial methods of birth control. So he quoted from there fairly liberally in his address.
Now, as we said, some Catholics were left wondering whether Pope Francis, where he stood on the issue of contraception. Based on some past statements of his, could you refresh our viewers on some of the past things that Pope Francis said that actually sparked controversy on this issue?
I think you're referring to his comments in 2015, January, when he flew back from the Philippines. And he talked about, he made a comment on the airplane while flying back about how it is irresponsible for Catholics to breed like rabbits. Now, faithful Catholics were outraged, and some of the liberal media went on to insinuate that he might be advocating artificial methods of birth control. But the next month, in February, the Vatican issued a profuse apology and said that Francis was very sorry if he had offended couples with large families, with many children, because it was never his intention to say that having many children is wrong, or that couples should use artificial methods of birth control.
Well, now, Jules, also in his recent statement, he once again lamented the devastation caused by the whole contraceptive culture.
Absolutely, Brad. He talked about the demographic decline of Italy and Europe. And I quote, he says, there are ways to confront the problem of demographic collapse. Now, this is in the light of what he has been saying over the last 3 years, at least 3 or 4 times, reminding Italy very strongly that, I mean, a predominantly Catholic, a traditionally Catholic country where the birth rate has fallen so abysmally. Francis says that the future looks very bleak indeed, and he says we are facing a dark demographic winter.
And Pope Francis, you mentioned he does mention directly Pope Paul VI 1968 epic encyclical on contraception, Humanae Vitae, that caused such backlash amongst Catholics, laity and clerics alike.
Yes, he does mention that. As we all know, that has been a battleground against liberals and faithful Catholics. But he also quotes from his own encyclical, Amoris Laetitia, sorry, not the encyclical, but the apostolic exhortation, Amoris Laetitia. And that, again, has been a battleground because the notoriously famous footnote, as we all know, seems to advocate divorce sacraments for divorced and remarried Catholics.
Well, that whole thing there would be in following your conscience. Now, Pope Francis does also push the what's called the natural family planning. That's what the conference was about, the spacing of births for serious reasons by the use of female biomarkers over the weekend, specifically the monthly increase in mucus. Other biomarkers, include the rise of the cervical position, the increase in body temperature, or monitoring the female hormones with the use of test strips. These biomarkers, Jules, really are a far cry from the so-called rhythm method that simply counted days between female cycles. These biomarkers, though, allow a woman to be over 99% certain if she is fertile. That's a great aid to having babies or spacing births. Did the Pope have any qualifiers on that, on the natural family planning, the use of that in his address?
Well, he was particularly focused on the Billings method. He commended this organization and other pro-life organizations for promoting this method, but he did not go into the nuances, the theological and the medical, biological nuances that you have just touched upon, Brad.
Okay, well, the Billings method was about the mucus part, but there's also the hormones, cervical position, temperature, and things that women can use. I guess just bringing up here, Pope Paul VI did in Humanae Vitae, paragraph 16 actually, talk about the natural means for spacing births are really to be used when there are, this is a quote from him, well-grounded reasons for spacing births. And it seems like that last part usually falls off the radar of married couples and the pastoral guidance that they're given. But Jules, it's great to hear Pope Francis defending and upholding church teaching. It's cause for hope for us all, and thank you for your uplifting report.
Thank you, Brad.